Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome here to the second race of the fourth season of the Dark Horse Racing Series presented by Troy Lee Designs. It's the first road course stop on the season as we're here at Road America. Qualifying currently underway. A few drivers have already put down some lap times, and they are going to have about another 5 minutes to be able to try and better their lap times. Polo Hernandez currently sits on the top of the leaderboard as we're going to follow his machine around this 14-corner track. Seth Cole alongside of Scott Rankin. And Scott, last season we ended up seeing an absolute domination by Robert Maleska III, who of course comes into this season the defending winner from last week in that fuel mileage strategy at Michigan. So he's the guy everybody's chasing. Did anybody go back, you think, look at footage from last season of ways to be able to topple that 91?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I was talking to a few guys this week, and they every single one of them said that they were watching laps, they were looking at times from last week, they were looking at everything. You know, they were looking how they can improve, where he's weak, how are they going to be able to just beat him. Because you have a look at the fuel last week, he was quickest on track, he was right there the entire time, and they still couldn't beat him. Why? He was fuel saving. He was doing everything he needed to do. So they've got to outthink him tonight, but it's going to be so tough to outthink a guy like Robert Maleska.
Looking here at the 91, who's about to come around and start his first timed lap. You see top of the board is Henry Bennett. If there is a driver that might be able to take away the Road America crown from him, it might be that 007, because Henry Bennett was the fastest in practice. He was the only driver to hit a 143 then, and he sits atop the board right now with a 143.4. So he's definitely got the speed. The question is, does he have the longevity that Maleska showed last season?
Potentially, we've definitely seen splashes from him. He's been there and he's been thereabouts quite a lot of the time as well. You know, I mean, have a look back to Indy, and Indy was probably a really, really good showing of his potential pace. You know, in the dying stages of the last season. So, look, I mean, it's all there. There's an opportunity for him tonight, whether or not he can grab it with both hands. Because you've got to remember that road racing could it creates an opportunity for more mistakes to be made. And that's what a lot of these guys are going to be out there and thinking about tonight is, how hard am I pushing? When am I going to push? Do I need to be going at 100% speed the entire race? And a lot of those guys will look back and they'll go, maybe not. Probably just back the pace down just a tittle bit, but I'll run more consistent laps.
Looking there at Nick DeGrood, he finished 7th here a year ago. We saw just moments ago, around the racetrack, Matt Wagner, who finished 4th here last year, was a mainstay up and towards the podium at every road course stop last season. There's Bronson Stafford, who had a top 3 finish last week at Michigan. Of course, very familiar with the DW12 car, and right now sits 6th on the board in that machine. Jim Herrick in the 57, another guy that was, no pun intended, but a bit of a dark horse driver back at the road course races last season. You'd see him consistently up inside of the top 5, maybe a little bit further out in 6th or 7th, but he always was up inside of the top 10, and one of the guys that might be outside the box in terms of strategy here tonight as well, because he seemed to be one of the drivers that could stretch it the furthest on fuel when we made the road course stops back in Season 3.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's about picking your draft buddies. It's about picking the packs that you're going to stay with, you know, all of these sorts of things. You can't necessarily just go out there and just foot to the floor, see how fast you can potentially go the whole time. Sometimes you've got to use that brain. Sometimes you've got to sit back. Sometimes you just got to watch the guys that are around you. Fuel stops. Look how important they were to the race last week. Robert Maleska won by, what was it, 20 seconds? 30 seconds? When was the last time you saw an Indy race in an oval get won by that sort of a margin?
Yeah,
it does not happen.
And we'll see if he's going to be able to put on as much of a dominating performance here today. I'm trying to remember back. I think I correctly remember that there were only 5 or 6 drivers that finished this Road America race on the lead lap last season. Of course, a big part of that is because we don't really have full course yellows at these lengthy road courses. Incidents that take place usually are off the racing surface, and so there'll be a local yellow, but it will not get all these drivers bunched back up. And so with the amount of laps that they have to run here tonight, 37 in total, more than likely all being under the green flag, we're going to probably see drivers, at least towards the second half of this race, probably falling off the lead lap, especially when we get to around the green flag pit stops. Now, it's interesting because if you look back at last season here at Road America, we ran 35 laps. This season, we're running 37 laps. Do those extra 2 laps come into play in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I mean, I get the feeling that there's a really, really strong potential here, that those extra couple of laps may actually take away a fuel strategy. They may lock things in very, very specifically to one sort of strategy. So keep that in the back of your mind. It may rob us, you know, of a potential. Did Robert Maleska... No, Robert Maleska got his first lap in. He was just complaining in the chat that he didn't get the opportunity to get his second lap in once he'd heated up those tires.
It's going to sit 3rd on the starting lineup for tonight. Henry Bennett and Polo Hernandez. They are going to take the front row for this evening's race. Maleska the 3rd and Rick Ravon, they're going to be in row 2. And Matt Wagner is going to complete the top 5 alongside of Bronson Stafford. Taking a look at the rest of the starting lineup here tonight for this 37-lapper in Elkhart, Michigan. Obviously, One of the big stories from last season, and I was actually observing it in practice here this week as well, the corners that you would normally expect to be the trouble corners here at Road America, they really aren't. Normally, the two places that are singled out are turn 5, the Maureen sweep, and over in turn 12, Canada Corner. Now, Canada Corner has been a little bit of an issue for these guys in practice, but the two main places that have really been issues have been a couple of left-hand corners, turn 6, the uphill off of the Maureen sweep, and turn 8 off of Hurry Downs. Really interesting because drivers are actually having some difficulty with the rumble strips off those two particular corners, not giving them the grip they need, and they spin the thing out.
Look, in Canada Corner, you can say that there should be issues. I really don't think there should be issues at Canada Corner. Canada Corner creates a really, really good opportunity for drivers to showcase how they want to attack a corner. Do they want to go a little bit deeper, or do they want to back the corner up a little bit, get on the power a lot sooner? There's two really good lines there. Canada Corner is generally not the one where you see big mistakes at. The one where you do normally see big mistakes at is actually Hurry Downs. The reason for it is that Hurry Downs itself is quite a blind entry to the left-hand side of the corner, so you really can't pick up the apex until very, very late, and there's not a lot of turn-in point markers there. Now, what that does do is it kicks the car out towards the right-hand side. There isn't a lot of grip on that right-hand side of the road there, so that's why you do actually see the guys having issues. And yes, like you mentioned it unsettles the car across those rumble strips as well. So keep your eyes on that. Turn 5 is so tricky because, now correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking turn 5 is the one down at the bottom end of the middle straight?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So the reason why this is such a tricky section of the course is that you may start braking before you come over the crest of the hill. What that means is that you've got to get on the brakes, and then the car unloads itself. As soon as the car unloads itself, there's less grip available to be slowing the car down. That means you have to come out of the brake a little bit, and then you've got to get back into it as the car settles down. Then you're on a downhill slope as well. Cars don't like to pull themselves up going downhill. The other thing that it does is it transitions weight of the car towards the front wheels. What it makes it so easy to do is lock those front tires. As soon as you lock those front tires, you're going straight on. We saw it, Lewis Hamilton at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix bumped his front brake bias forwards using his magic button, Brake Magic. This is exactly what this section of the track is going to do to the cars. It's going to transition weight forward, which invariably transitions brake bias forward, although you have less control over it. And it creates a lot of locking, and when you lock the brakes up, you've got too much speed, you just go straight on. Oh, we got a car pulling to the infield.
And that's Eric Schaus in the 72. And now he's going to come back onto the track, so I don't know if he's dropping to the rear of the field potentially here, but well, now he's going to start working his way back up to his position, which would have been on the outside of row 4 in 8th place. Schaus, a former winner from last season at Poconos, so as they get that all settled back out, you saw that starting lineup. 18 drivers to take the green flag here tonight, and starting lineup brought to you by LMCgear.com. LMCgear.com is a one-stop shop for all your motorcycle, camping, and backpacking needs, specializing in camping gear that is ultra lightweight and compact, making it perfect for carrying on your motorcycle or in a backpack. And they also carry all the motorcycle accessories you need to get your gear safely down the road. Check out lightweightmotorcyclescampinggear.com today. I was thinking about
where
those.
I'm heading. I'm a bikie guy myself, so that's really good to have a sponsor. Look, 2 weeks in a row, we've got two sponsors that I absolutely adore already. So this is going to make for a great Dark Horse IndyCar season.
Well, you can go there, but you're sticking here for these 37 laps with me. Then you can go. You can go and check them out. But I'm thinking about those extra 2 laps that are on the board here from last season. Last year, these drivers split the race right down the middle. We saw them pretty much come down pit road anywhere from lap 16 to lap 18, splitting the 35-lapper in half. Those, if I recall correctly, some of them stretched it just as far as they could go, and that was at lap 18. If it's the same fuel cell here tonight that they dealt with last season, these guys might have to actually save some fuel on the second run to be able to make it to the checkered flag, because if they ran it flat out, full out here, 110%, for the entirety of this race, they would probably be running out of fuel with maybe 2 to go, maybe even on the white flag lap.
again, risk versus reward. Do you want to risk it? Some of these guys, so Robert Molesca, yeah, he might risk it. He's already got himself a win. He's ahead of in the championship. He's the best on fuels, what we showed last week out. He's sitting on row 3. He's got a draft pack around him. He may just sit back there, just watch these guys go toe-to-toe. He'll have the best seat in the house for it, and, big winner, he'll be saving the most fuel. It's almost like we're going to see a repeat of last week all over again as they go to the green.
Green flag in the air. Henry Bennett going to bring us down to the start-finish line, and we're underway in this 37-lap event. It's going to be the battle for second place. Robert Molesca III wasting no time. He's going to try and look to drivers right on the 0-1. Couldn't do it. Actually checks up Rick Ravon, who was going to challenge him for third place.
Yeah, so it's going to be... Look, the field's getting through here. Ultimately, what I wanted to see from them was just let everybody settle in. This race isn't decided right now. This race is set up by what you achieve on this first lap. The first lap, consider it. Why do cars race so aggressively on the first lap? One, the cars are so close together, there's opportunities that present themselves in the first lap. Car goes through a corner side by side with another car. Both of those cars are going to be speed compromised. That means that there could be an opening for you once a hole presents itself. Option number 2, why do we see so many car-to-car contacts on lap number 1? Well, it's the lap when the field is the most condensed. What that creates is the most car-to-car interactions of any period during the race. And when you have more car-to-car interactions, even if there's only a 1-2% chance of a car contact, invariably there's going to be enough car-to-car interactions that you will have that accident. Stats, man, that's what it's all about.
It's interesting you bring that up, too, with the cars being in close proximity here at the start of the race, because this is the first event this season where drivers are going to get to utilize the push-to-pass. They have a total of 10 push-to-passes during the course of this race, and we're not even a full lap in, and already 3 drivers have used one. Henry Bennett, the race leader, Molesca III, who's in 3rd place, and Eric Schaus back in the 7th spot.
Yeah, so what that says to me about Henry Bennett is that he wants to punch a big hole and get away from everyone. He's trying to basically say to these guys, I am not going to offer you the draft. I'm going to run this race at breakneck pace. I'm going to try and run away from you. I'm going to try and lead it from the front every single lap of the race. I'm going to be a little bit fuel compromised, but I'm setting myself up to do that. If he can break this toe to Paulo Hernandez, the race might be run already.
That's a pass for 6th place. Eric Schaus getting around Bronson Stafford. Just saw Matt Wagner use the push to pass. George Anzaldo used the push to pass. And also Matthew Rodriguez, who's filling in for Mike Tellier here tonight in that 97, back in the 15th position. He's used a push to pass. Eric Schaus actually just used his second push to pass here. And I can understand the fact that these drivers are wanting to, while they're in close proximity, use the push to passes now, but what do you think is a conservative number to save towards the end, just in case you're in a last-minute battle for position with, say, 3 to go?
We've got, say, 8 for the race? We've got 37 laps. Look, I'm going to break the race down into quarters here. Quarters are going to be roughly 9 to 10 laps. One of the quarters of the race is probably going to be 10 laps. And ultimately, I'm going to set that up as the first quarter. What I'm going to use during that first quarter, one and one only. I want to save those remaining 7 for the final 3 quarters. What I'm going to use during that second quarter, again, 1. It's going to need to be an opportunity where I need to get by a guy. I'm equal with him on pace, but I just need to make that overtake just so I'm a little bit ahead of him, and I can again assess my options. Final half of the race, that leaves me 6 push-to-passes. Then I can start to use them to attack. I'm going to go ahead and say that in the final 2 quarters of the race, I'm going to go with 2, and then leave 4 for the final laps. This all changes. Why does this all change? As soon as the field starts to spread out, well, you're going to need to make sure that you can catch up to the car ahead. Sometimes just getting into that car's draft is enough to be able to pass them. Using a push to pass to get yourself back up into that zone, definitely worth it.
We were looking back momentarily there at the 89 of Nick DeGroot, the Season 2 champion, right now in the 12th position. It's going to be kind of interesting to follow his storyline here today because DeGroot was really good last season at the Speedways, and there were a couple of road courses he was good at. I went into Road America last season fully expecting he was going to be up at the front. He never made his way into the top 5. He finished out that race in the 7th position, and right now mired outside of the top 10. So I don't know if it's just that he and Road America don't really like each other or what the case is, but this is certainly not the performance that I was expecting to see out of Nick DeGroot here tonight, as opposed to last season as well. And we'll see if maybe he might be conserving his stuff for later on in this race, as Kobe Moore just picked up another spot. Keep an eye on here. He finished top 5 last season in the 5th position here at Road America.
Consider as well, Nicholas Winnox, something's happened to him on the opening lap. He is a mile and a half back off the tail end of the field. So I'd say his race might be slightly compromised. Alternatively, remember, let's talk that fuel strategy again. How long were the guys able to go? What was it? You said 18 laps at most? That gets us to 36. There might be a couple guys that are looking to run out on their own. Now, if they're thinking about doing that, and they're somewhere from, say, where the 61 is, potentially the car behind him, coming down for an early stop might not be so bad of an idea. What happens if they do that? They drop all the way to the tail end of the field, but all of a sudden, instead of racing guys, they're off in clean air. They can focus on their own race. Might be worth an undercut.
It's very interesting. If you look at the landscape of the field from last season to this, you look inside the top 7, there are 5 drivers crossing the start-finish line right now that didn't even take to the track back in Season 3, and one of them is leading this race, Henry Bennett, by 0.8 of a second back to Polo Hernandez. And obviously as well, the point standings are very close coming into this race since we've only got one race under our belt. Bronson Stafford, 14 points behind last week's winner, Robert Molesco III. Jim Brooks and Gale Brooks up inside the top 5. They are 19 and 22 points back respectively. Rick Ravon right now completes the top 5, 24 points out of the points lead.
Yeah, so there's a few stories yet to play themselves out. And Robert Molesco, again, is our returning series champion. He knows what it takes to win a championship. He won the vast majority of the races last season. That means that he knows how to push hard, how to win races. He won this race last year. Alternatively, if you look at him, he also knows what he needs to do to maintain that championship lead. He's got a few guys in the back of his mind that he's just sort of keeping tabs on. Yeah, it was a fuel race last week. Yeah, that threw a few spanners in the works. So ultimately, he come out on top. The rest of the field behind him got severely jumbled. That plays out into his favor. Ultimately, his goal right now, keep tabs on Henry Bennett. Keep tabs on Polo Hernandez. Push when he's able to, push when he needs to. But other than that, I think he's going to be in fuel conservation mode.
Riding on board here with Robert Molesco III, looking ahead to the 0-1 of Polo Hernandez. And yeah, you talk about last season how dominant Molesco III was. Well, to give an idea of how dominant he was here at Road America, 35 laps, he led 34 of them. The only lap he didn't lead was led by Matt Wagner, and that was because Molesco had to give up the lead to come to pit lane, and Wagner stretched it an extra lap. So if that had not been the case, Molesco more than likely would have led every lap of last year's event.
Just really, really good. I mean, ultimately, when you're coming in so heavily of a dominant champion, you get a little bit relaxed. You can get a little bit complacent. Robert Molesco doesn't strike me as that kind of guy, which is really, really good. That's what I wanted to see. Always striving for that next tier of competitiveness, that next tier of lifting his own game. Interestingly, it's really good to see a group of guys taking it to him. Remember last week's race? There was a pack of guys that he was surrounded by. And he opted just to... Caution is the better part of valor. He's just going to sit back there. He's going to, again, do exactly what he's doing here. Keep tabs on everyone. He's going to fuel save. He's going to make sure that whilst not necessarily right now, he's beating these guys out on track. He is beating these guys in terms of the fuel game. He actually just had a big off track there, so there's a few mistakes creeping in a little bit here for Robert Molesco. I like this because this is the field taking it to him.
Maybe he was focused on where Polo Hernandez was in the hit that section of the corner and might have tried to do the same thing. That's another thing that you kind of have to do is run your own race and not worry about that guy up ahead, because so many times you notice a driver does one thing, you think, well, maybe I'll gain some time by doing another, and next thing you know, well, that isn't going to work out in your favor. So Molesco trying to get back on the hunt of that 0-1 for the second position. Now, I'm watching the lap times here. And I saw this in practice too, and maybe you can explain this anomaly. Normally, to a stock car guy like me, the more laps you run, the more tire fall off there is, the slower your speed is going to be. These guys are about to complete their 5th lap, and they're actually improving their lap time faster and faster every time they come around.
Yeah, so a couple things to note out of that. Fuel burn. So stock cars... Let's talk about the difference in terms of America's 2 key motorsports for you. So on one hand, you have Indy cars, open wheel cars. They're light, tons of downforce, small tires. We'll get back to those small tires in a moment. Stock cars, big, heavy, tons of power. Look, right now they have a lot of downforce for what they have, but ultimately in terms of things, they're actually quite a low downforce car for the amount of mass that's going on. And quite crucially, How big are those tires? I had the opportunity. I'm an Australian, for those of you who haven't picked up on the accent yet. I had the opportunity to go to Sydney Motorsport Park recently and see some Aussie stock cars. Those tires, man. I turned to one of my iRacing mates at the event and I went, okay, now I can see why the tires fall off so much. Those tires are massive on stock cars. There's so much of them in contact with the race surface. They wear, they heat up. The amount of heat that they keep in the tires is because they have such a big friction, such a big contact patch with the road. These tires don't need that. They generate the grip that they need from a smaller amount of tire, which means they can run faster for longer. The tire wear just is not there, and quite crucially, they don't overheat the tires. What you'll see from these guys is that until the tires get down to about a 60% sort of threshold on the tire, they'll run very consistent lap times until that starts to fall off. The things that are going to be more impactful on lap time is track temperature and fuel level. Those are going to be the key factors. Right now we're running 1600 local time, so 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Track temperature may dip off throughout the duration of this race, which means the grip will come to the road. The other thing is rubber laid down on the circuit. Rubber makes a better grip surface when it contacts more rubber. Asphalt's close. Asphalt's quite good, but not quite as good as rubber. So the more rubber that there is actually within the road surface, the more grip it'll create. So there's a few things going on there.
Yeah, let's take a look and see what the current weather conditions are that these drivers are dealing with. Track temperature about 20 degrees higher than the ambient temperature out there, 90 degrees, not up there in the triple digits, so these drivers aren't necessarily slipping and sliding around out there, but to a point that you made earlier, it would determine just how much grip they would have going into these heavy braking zones.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting factors that doesn't get talked about quite a lot is also that humidity level. That actually does play a lot bigger a factor than you think. Ultimately, once it gets above 50, it doesn't play a huge sort of impact until it gets to sort of 80s and 90s. There's not much difference between anywhere from about 40% to about 80% humidity. Then it starts to create a huge deal again. And then very, very low humidity is the exact same thing. If you ever see a foggy race on iRacing, that's what causes those cold temperatures, and high humidity is what causes those. So there's a few factors. Look, right now the track seems to be quite rubbered in compared to because we've had quite a lot of running during practice. There's 90-minute practice session prior to the race, 10 minutes for qualifying to get the cars out there and turning their laps. Another factor that doesn't get talked about often enough as well is driver fatigue. I mean, we mentioned it, 90 minutes for practice, 10 minutes for qualifying, all this sort of setup. Robert Maleska didn't get his second qualifying lap in. He ran out of time. That could be impacting his race. Paulo Hernandez right now will be pushing quite heavily. Why? He needs to make sure that he maintains that draft from Henry Bennett ahead of him. He's so close to losing that draft. So that, there's all of these factors, all these different things that are going through a driver's mindset. Cars around them, how hard he races. It is such a difficult beast to tame, and that's why there are so few people that are able to sim race to the level that we're seeing from these guys.
Well, this battle for 7th place has been fun to watch for the last 3 laps or so. It has involved George Anzaldo, Eric Schaus, and Covey Moore. They continue to swap that position back and forth. A lot of push-to-passes being used in this exchange. Oh, no! Eric Schaus runs straight into the back of George Anzaldo, heading into turn 5. Both of these drivers going to have a lot of damage, have to limp it back to pit road, and just like that, the closest battle on track becomes our first contact incident of the day.
Let's talk about what potentially could have gone on there. I'd say, just looking at it initially, Eric Schaus has just missed his braking marker. But let's talk about the different aero configurations and what that does to the car under braking. Eric Schaus has been at the lead of this battle pack for a couple of laps now. That means that his braking markers are different. He's traveling a little bit slower than when he was in the draft. The addition as well of a drafting car in front of him, that reduces the amount of grip that he has available. There's less force pushing the front tires, pushing the rear tires into the road surface. So he arrives at the braking scene for turn number 5 with more speed and less grip, and he's just barely missed his braking marker all at the same time. That makes for one of the worst possible moments that you can come to.
You see right there the damage on the left front wing, also a bit of a ripple on that right front wing as well. Now these drivers do have a faster pair at their disposal, but I've seen a lot of times where drivers will get even a minimal amount of damage like that and they bring it to pit lane because it doesn't look like much, but man does that affect the handling of the race car.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's very similar. Oh, it's odd that Eric Schaus didn't take the option to come to pit road there. That says to me that he's got a fuel number specifically in mind that he's chasing down. He has to get to a specific lap number before he can come to pit road. Ultimately, I think he's there already, but that's by my calculations. So, what happens when the car's damaged like this? Normally with a stock car, they just lose a little bit of speed in a straight line. It's like holding a parachute out in the wind. Yeah, they don't have a whole bunch going on. That's why, ultimately, the amount of downforce that they have doesn't really get affected all that much. 1% worth of downforce on those cars, they really don't feel it. An Indy car, however, has a lot of downforce and a lot less weight. They are so reliant on the amount of downforce pressing those front wheels into the ground that as soon as you take some of that away, you make more mistakes. Look at Eric Schaus, cannot get the car pulled up at turn number 5.
Saw back there Matthew Rodriguez with an issue off of turn 14. Got the thing refired. Battle for 7th is on. Jim Herrick trying to hold off Covey Moore. Both of these drivers had solid outings last year at this track. Moore in 5th and Jim Herrick in 8th. And both of them just outside of the top 5. Another guy's just outside the top 5, but having a solid outing is Bronson Stafford. First time that he has taken to this track under the Dark Horse banner, and coming off that runner-up finish last week at Michigan, just trying to keep Robert Maleska within striking distance for the points lead, and actually Maleska has hit pit road now. So maybe, just maybe, these guys, as opposed to the one-stop strategy they were able to do last season, maybe the fuel tank is less this year, and they may have to actually go with a two-stop strategy.
Yeah, and that actually explains Eric Schaus going past the pit lane for that one extra lap as well. Maybe I just wasn't aware of it. Like we were talking about the fuel strategies from last season, a little bit different. This could be the reason from here. I'll be interested to keep an eye on Eric Schaus. That'll be the telling factor about, and he's just gone past pit lane. That is suicide for Eric Schaus. He is losing. He's 5 seconds a lap slower. 5 seconds a lap slower. That is too much. So he's clearly made another mistake somewhere on that lap, which has been caused by all of that downforce loss. I think he's got an idea of a lap time and a specific area of the track in mind, and he's worried he might pick up more damage later on in the race, and he's banking that up.
Well, Eric Schaus didn't come to pit road, but other Eric did. Eric Peterson in the 36 has hit pit lane, so now 2 drivers starting what looks like maybe the first round of green flag pit stops. Covey Moore continues to march his way to the front, bypassed Jim Herrick, and now he moves up to 6th with the 91 having come to pit road. And just how difficult a pit road would this be to get onto? Because it's so unusual in the fact that the entrance to pit lane is actually uphill.
It's actually not that bad to get onto pit lane. The issue is spotting the pit lane entry markers. So those cones that you see on the entry to pit road, those you just can't see them until you crest the hill. They're too small for what's there. But that's just a quirk of the track. As a driver, you have to practice that. You have to practice your pit lane entries. You have to pick a marker further back down. Sometimes that just means that you've got to take that extra cautious step and back things up 5, 10, 15 extra feet, and just make sure that you're getting to pit road. What's the worst possible thing that happens? You get a penalty. What is gaining an extra couple feet? It's going to get you a 10th. It's going to get you 2 tenths at most. You're going to lose 40 seconds in the process. That risk is just not worth the reward.
Absolutely not. I agree with you on that, especially in the fact that there's no caution to come out that will save you. A mistake on pit road like that is more than likely going to cost you anywhere from 5, 6, 7 spots on the racetrack if everybody else is able to hit their marks on pit road. Had another driver coming down pit lane with Bronson Stafford. Eric Schaus has now brought the 72 to pit lane, and just an update there on George Anzaldo, the driver that he got into over in turn 5. He's returned back to the racetrack. He is 1 lap down. He did use his faster pair, but not after a nearly 3-minute tow to pit lane, so obviously, he's just hoping that other drivers run into some issues. He can pick up some positions and some points here today at Road America. So we're still waiting on our race leader, Henry Bennett, to hit pit lane. And he just did something that did not happen last season. And that is, he just set a lap time as, Matthew Rodriguez with a lot of issues there off of turn 14. But Henry Bennett last time by, he ran a 144.112. That betters the best lap that Robert Maleska III put down here last season. He ran a 127 last year.
Hold on, let's keep our eyes on things. These guys are coming to pit road right now, so we'll talk about lap times in a few moments because that's throwing that all out of whack. What this is doing is you've got to remember Robert Maleska has recognized he's saved enough fuel. He's gone for the undercut. He's pulled out from underneath these guys' rear wing. He's gone, hey, I'm gonna push as hard as I possibly can for a couple laps. Come out ahead of these guys. All of a sudden my race is so much better off. So keep your eyes on these pit stops and where Robert Maleska pops out.
Well, he's now moved up to 6th, and he's about to bypass all of these guys as he is on the front straightaway. Like Polo Hernandez, Henry Bennett might be the only two to get out ahead of him at the time. And obviously Maleska III is going to have that up-to-speed momentum. We'll see if he can reel those top two in, as just about everybody on the lead lap came down pit road that time. I believe the only driver that has stayed out an extra lap is the 57 of Jim Herrick, but even he is not running ahead of Maleska III, who has already been to pit road.
Interesting. I'm wondering whether or not when these guys are going to burn their optional, the alternate tire set, which is the softer tire, the faster tire. So if you want, I can go through the whole spiel of why the softer tire is faster, but we'll save that for another day if we don't have to burn that right now. Interesting to note that even though he went for the undercut, Maleska's come out further behind. That's not worked in his favor. Normally when you're going for an undercut, it's because, so let's now talk about the aero of these cars and what it does when you're following the terrain. We saw what it did to Eric Schaus heading down into turn number 5. What it does is it puts more wear on the tires. You're trying to load the tires up and get them to turn into the corner more. When you've got cars ahead of you, they're cutting off the air from getting to your wings. That means your wings are running at a less efficient number. What that means is anytime you attempt to turn into a corner, you've got less downforce. Less force pressing the tire into the road. You try to load the tires up at the same rate that you normally would with a full downforce, clean air in front of you. You're going to scrub the tire a little bit. Scrubbing the tire, you turn in the wheel in a little bit too far, and the tire's not quite getting there. It slides itself laterally across the road. It doesn't grip properly. That creates extra friction, extra wear, extra heat. All the things a race car driver does not want. What he's tried to do there is undercut these guys, get out, get in fresh air, go gangbusters. What it doesn't do is it removes the draft on the straights. What that means is that the stronger period of being in the wake of a car following you, whereby there's a hole being punched, is no longer there. It seems to me that the draft is such a crucial factor for the lap times around here that it's actually the worst possible move he can make. He wants to stick in this draft battle as long as he can.
Jim Herrick has hit pit lane. We saw Matthew Rodriguez. I don't think he'll be sending turn 14 a Christmas card anytime soon. That's at least the third time I've seen him have trouble with that final corner. And you talked about the fact that that undercut really didn't help Maleska. The one thing it did do, it actually gained him a little bit of ground on Polo Hernandez. Those two were separated by about 3 seconds before the pit stops began. The gap. Oh no, Maleska III just binned it! Just binned it into the tire barrier there off of turn 6.
And he's not in range, so this is an extra stop. That's his race done. That is his race done. He needs now to get into the pit lane, get out, get that fast repair. He's only been in a couple laps ago. This is not going to get him fuel to the end. It's going to get him close, but another circulation through pit lane is going to ruin his day, let alone his fast repair. If something happens now in front of him, and he is just an innocent bystander in it, there's nothing he can do.
I'm on board with Rick Raven. Oh, and now off of Canada Corner, he's going to have issues.
And toes!
Oh my word. Now I wonder, I was going to point out the fact that I believe when he made contact with the tire barriers in the first incident, he hit with the back end, so that rear wing was really mangled up. Did that lose him the downforce he needed going into Canada Corner?
Potentially, and it's so difficult because it's not something you as a driver can see. You don't have access to being able to see your rear wing. You cannot see the lack of downforce. There's nothing you can do about that. You would be pretty much aware that there's a problem there, and you got to remember, when he comes back out into the circuit, it's into the carousel, a high downforce section of the circuit. He goes through from there into the kink. I'm actually just going to go on board with him quickly and just see if there's any issues with his steering rack. Or a tiny little bit of left hand down, which means that when he's braking, you want to brake the car in a straight line, else, oh, he just misses his brake marker, well and truly. and he just attempts to turn into the corner, and there's just not enough there. So, okay, so that's what happened at Canada Corner. Ultimately, coming off just before the carousel, what's happened there is he's just overdriven it, over-applied the throttle. He got happy on the go pedal. Is the long and short of it. Man, is second-hand championship lead over to Bronson Stafford?
It could.
I don't know what
very
I have
well. It really
sit around and
depends.
listen to that all week.
Yeah, I mean, Bronson Stafford right now running in the 5th position. We saw there the first incident. We're going to continue to just watch Maleska the third as he heads down to Canada Corner, show you the incident that he had there. But yeah, I mean, the fact that Maleska came into this race, the defending winner at Road America, he had the win last week, which had him coming into today as the points leader. Plus, he's the defending champion. I mean, this is huge on so many levels, and there you see him into the tire barriers there off of Canada Corner. Now, he did have that tow a little bit later on in the course than George Anzaldo did, so he didn't spend a full 3 minutes on pit lane like the 6 did, but he did spend at least a minute and a half with his tow, so that has put him right now barely on the tail end of the lead lap, and as you alluded to, more than likely that is absolutely taking him out of the picture of winning this race. And you have to wonder, obviously the rumble strip came into play there. You mentioned him getting back to the throttle a little bit too soon, but did he feel pressured? I mean, if you look back at last season, he was out in front, clean air, nobody behind him. He was just out for a Sunday drive. He could hit his marks as best he wanted to. With having Henry Bennett and Polo Hernandez in front of him a majority of this run already, was he trying to do something different?
It's so tough to say, because you've also got to remember, he's been in that draft for such a long period of time, he should have adapted to that now. It's a low-speed section of the course, so downforce won't be anywhere near as effectful on the car, because you've got to build up that pressure over the wings. The wings require air moving over them. The more air that's moving over them, i.e. the faster you're moving, the more it works, but also the more it can work like a parachute when you've got too much. It's difficult. It's a mistake. I haven't seen Robert Maleska make a mistake yet. I'm going to be honest. That's not... He's so quick, but he's so consistent, he's so clean. Is this the cracks in his championship hopes that his competition want to see? That's my question.
Yeah, well, I think the easy answer would be yes. I mean, I think everybody looked at last season and the dominating performance he put on at all configurations of tracks, the 1.5 miles, the 2 mile tracks, the short tracks, as well as the road courses, and he was public enemy number 1 coming into this season, no doubt about it. And now all these drivers, seeing that he is currently back in the 14th position, they want to take advantage of it. This moves Rick Ravon now up into the 3rd position, Matt Wagner up into 4th. Now, these are guys that, with the exception of Wagner, if we look at the 2 car, he didn't exactly have the best of runs last week at Michigan. If I recall correctly, I believe he finished back in the 7th or 8th position. So I don't know if he's going to be able to capitalize on taking the points lead. You got Bronson Stafford back there in 5th. It's going to be close between about 3 or 4 drivers, just based on the fact it's early on in the schedule and the points are so closely condensed.
Yeah, look, I mean, you know, it depends. It's going to be very, very close. The skill and the consistency that he's shown recently, well, not even recently, last season, I would still put my money back on him. But it's the first cracks. And I really hate to use this term, because as a broadcaster, we really want to talk about it because it's so uncharacteristic of him. But when somebody, like a broadcasting group, you think about it, what do the IndyCar drivers have to deal with all the time? They make a mistake in their championship hunt. That's all people can talk about for the next couple of weeks. That means, psychologically, you have to reject those thought patterns, because else it's sitting there. And if there's something else in an IndyCar, when you're doing 200 plus mile an hour at any of the race courses that we go to, you're thinking about that. That delays your reaction time. That delays your adaptation to the scenario. You're not focused 100%. All you're thinking about is don't make a mistake again, don't make a mistake again, oh, there's another mistake. Now they're going to be talking about it more. Now, you know, you've got to remove it from your psyche. You've got to move on as a driver. And it is one of the hardest things that any professional athlete has to deal in our current day and age, is the amount of attention that they get when they make a mistake.
And to your point as well, a little bit more added pressure for Robert Maliska III is the next road course race we go to is Watkins Glen. It was one of the few tracks where he didn't lead a lap. He finished second place in that race to Alex Van de Sant, but it wasn't the dominating performance that we were used to seeing him do at the other road courses, as we almost had some contact for third between Rayvon and Wagner. You've got the car, I believe that is George Anzaldo, just behind these guys there. Oh, no, actually, that's Maliska the third in the 91. No, actually, no, correction. That is Anzaldo.
Correct.
Yep, in that 6 machine, just looking on at this battle. But, obviously a little bit of Watkins Glen redemption on the mind of him as well, and somebody bended there.
Hold on. Yeah, who was that? Was that Gary Corley?
I think it was, yep. Corley in the 7 with an issue there.
Oh, Maliska's left the server. Maliska's just left the server completely. So there'll be no points for him today.
And that means that if a couple of other drivers in Eric Schaus and Matthew Rodriguez can get back out there, Maliska would finish in the 18th position, which I would have to look back through my notes, but I believe that would be the lowest finish that Robert Maliska III has registered in a dark horse race.
Yeah, that's, drop rounds? Drop rounds, question mark? Is there drop rounds? I don't know.
I think there are.
Well, he's just opted to use his early, and that's... Sometimes as a driver, it's the smartest thing that you can possibly do. You recognize when it's not going your way, and you just go, okay, I need to move on, I need to shake this off. And the best way that you can shake it off is just by rejecting it. That to me shows smarts. The alternative side of that is, that says he's a quitter. Robert does, again... From the brief communications I've had with him, he does not strike me as that personality. You don't get to his skill level by being an air quotes quitter, right? That just does not happen. You have to continually keep adapting and improving. So mentally, he's rejecting those thoughts. He's trying to put himself in such a good light and focus on what he's trying to do.
I just checked back, and actually his worst finish in the Dark Horse Racing Series was a 31st position back in Season 3 at the short track of Iowa. So this does not mark his lowest finish in the Dark Horse Racing Series, but obviously it's going to really shake up the point standings, and it's going to be interesting too, because I believe he finished out every single race regardless of where he was running last season. It's going to be the first time, at least to my knowledge, that he will be DNFing a race, and you got to wonder, again, we kind of talked about the psyche. What is it going to do to his psyche when we get to a new track on the schedule next week at New Hampshire?
Oh, look, Whoa! Actually, just watching a car, I think Matt Wagner's just found the fence, yeah.
Yep.
So that will move Bronson Stafford up if he gets him in time, because that's definitely going to be a faster affair. I think he caught the barriers on the inside, so Bronson Stafford, who would currently be Robert Maliska's closest points rival, actually starting to have a good day. And the other interesting side of this coin for Bronson Stafford now is 4th place is good enough. Don't push it.
4th place right now, without a lap led, would get Bronson Stafford 35 points. I'm trying to figure out here in relation to Henry Bennett, who has been out in front pretty much the entirety of this race. Looks like he would lock up the most laps led in the next lap or so. And if he goes on to win this race, he would get 57 points. So that'd be a 12-point difference, or I'm sorry, actually a 22-point difference between those two. And those two coming into this race, they were separated by 19 points. So, according to my calculations, Bennett would be taking the points lead by just a couple minute points over Bronson Stafford.
So it's going to be close. Who thought when we come to Road America that the championship would be shaken up? It never even entered into the calculations that Robert Maliska would not be scoring points tonight. It never even popped into my head for a single moment that a driver of his talents, his credence, his pedigree would be making a mistake. But have a look at the drivers out there on track that have made mistakes. Mac Wagner has now made a mistake. Eric Schaus made a mistake and collided with another car. It's not easy getting these cars around, let alone getting these cars around a road course with the trickiness. Road America is a tricky track. It is a technical track. There are some sections that are quite easy, quite driver-friendly, and there are some sections where it really questions all that you have as a driver. It questions your patience. It questions your ability to keep the car on track for extended periods of time. Tire wear, fuel wear. You know, there's so much going on within a driver's field of vision. And then you add a push-to-pass system on top of that. You know, there's a lot to handle.
We're looking at the closest battle right now for the 10th spot between Jeff Heisung and Jim Herrick. Those three names that you threw out there, Maleska III won this race a year ago. Matt Wagner, who we saw have an issue with Canada Corner, he finished 4th here last year. And Eric Schaus, he finished 6th here last year. The one major thing that I'm seeing as a big difference between last season and this season is the car. Last year, they drove the IR-18. This season, they're driving the DW-12. Does that play into their driving style, having to kind of be a little bit different from one season to the next?
I mean, it definitely would have an impact. I can't tell you. I don't put enough laps into these cars to be able to tell you exactly what the differences are. But yeah, it would definitely be playing a factor. Any car differences, it definitely has a change. You know, push-to-pass system, aero trains, wake, you know, all of these different bits and pieces, they do play a major part. So where it is, how bad it is, how much it affects them, it's down to the individual driver. But I don't think you could say that there's a single driver in the field tonight that hasn't done their homework, done their practice, and made sure that they're prepared for the challenge. It's just, it's a mind snap, it's a little mistake, and it happens to the best of us. That's what's been proven tonight.
Well, Eric Peterson has come down pit lane, and he's just now leaving. I have to wonder if this is just a little bit too soon, though, because we saw most everybody stretched it about 12 laps. I think one driver, Jim Herrick, stretched it 13 laps on the first run, so I was thinking these guys were probably going to split this race into thirds, come down lap 12, come down lap 24, and then run to the finish. With Peterson coming to pit road when he did, this is about 3 or 4 laps earlier than what I was projecting. Now, granted, he was one of the first down pit road on the first cycle of pit stops, but even so, I'm not necessarily certain he'd be able to make it to the finish, as, how about that? Moving a driver out of the way. I believe that was Jim Brooks in the 51 that was in front of Polo Hernandez, and he got a little bit of an assistance out of the way over in turn 6.
That's interesting. I mean, for me, I think Polo Hernandez has just come up on him and just didn't realize, you know, the pace differential between the two drivers. But anyway, that's an adjustment that you got to make. Again, running in traffic, running around a lot of other guys. Polo, let's talk about him tonight. I mean, yeah, he's playing second fiddle to Henry Bennett, but this is a phenomenal drive from Polo Hernandez. He was doing quite well last week. Again, the fuel battle didn't necessarily go his way, but the McDonald's car, I mean, wow, what a drive from the 0-1 of Polo Hernandez to be in second place, to be so quick, so consistent. He's led before. You got to remember, he's been in front of Robert Maleska the entire race, as well as Henry Bennett, even with the issues. So this says to me, this is a 3-stop race.
Yep, because he's on pit road now, giving up the second position. And looking to see if anybody else inside the top 5 is going to come down. Looks like the next driver to come down is going to be the driver that he actually got into there, Jim Brooks, the 51.
Oh, is that a... I see a Matt Rodriguez completely destroyed IndyCar in the background.
Yep. He's been sitting on pit lane for the last 10 laps or so. Currently looks like he may be solidifying down the 18th position here tonight.
I can't say I'm surprised, but I am impressed with how bad he's destroyed that car. That takes talent.
I think if Road America had been a 13-corner track, he'd have been perfectly fine. But I think I saw him a perfect 3 for 3 and wrecking that thing off of turn 14 in 3 consecutive laps. He still sits on pit lane, however. If he can get out there, he could pick up a couple of spots. Robert Maleska III, as we documented, is out of this race. Right now scored 16th, and Eric Schaus has actually gone to the garage area as well. He is currently being scored in 17th place. So 2 big names coming into tonight's race that we fully expected to see up at the front of the field. Not even going to finish inside of the top 15. Bronson Stafford. Did he?
I think he come to pit lane. I think he did. I'm pretty sure I see him on pit lane.
Yeah, I thought I did too. I'm not seeing any pit stop time registered on my telemetry here, so that could be a glitch on our end. And now Henry Bennett, the race leader, is coming in.
I'm running alternative software just to let people go aware, because I read data better off different kinds of screens, as we all sort of do. His pit stop's actually about the same sort of length as everyone's around him. He's actually slightly longer, just slightly longer on pit road than the guys he's racing against last time through the lane.
So he's actually going to come out currently in the 8th position. Henry Bennett might give up the race lead here as he's on pit lane. No, he will not. Rick Ravon is going to come down. What happened? Oh, that's right. Polo Hernandez was on pit lane. I thought for a brief moment I'd forgotten, had a momentary lapse remembering he had actually made a pit stop. I thought he might have had an incident. He's actually now going to see if he can reel in Henry Bennett pitting 1 lap earlier. He was only running about a second and a half behind this 007. And looks like he's going to, at the moment, be running about maybe 1.6 seconds behind him. So nothing really lost, nothing really gained at this point in time between the 2 race leaders.
Yeah, and ultimately what this does do is it locks it. It guarantees that this is going to be a 3-stop race as well. Just quickly, Seth, what's the chances that we can grab an onboard lap with our race leader Henry Bennett the next time he comes past the stripe? Just so that way I can talk you through a lap. What you're trying to do with this car?
We'll be able to do that. Of course, one thing that I had to get used to when we come around and take a look is the new dash for these drivers. I looked at it and it was completely foreign to me. I was so used to what the IR18s had for their dash last season. Had to kind of familiarize myself with what all the different things mean. The one thing that I was able to establish early on up in the top center, that's the gear that they go into the corner with. So I at least got that far.
What's the lights there, Seth? Do you know what those are?
No, I don't. I think you're going to have to
They're
educate
shift
me on that
lights.
one.
They're shift lights.
Ha!
They're telling the drivers how close to shifting they are. So you'll actually see as the lights start to flash, that's when the drivers need to shift. So you can see he's 4th gear right now, running up to the final corner of the track. They flash just before he gets there, but he doesn't want to shift because shifting gains him absolutely nothing in this portion of the track. Run out of the last corner. I believe that's Nicholas Winnock heading to the lane. So on the right-hand side of the dash, the number 8, push to pass. You can't actually tell how many push to passes the drivers have used so far from the spectator client. That's to prevent other drivers and their spotters from being able to tell. So drives it really deep in, a lot of downforce. You can brake super late into turn number 1, back to 3rd gear, 4th, 5th, and this will probably be back to 3rd again, back to 2nd. So there you go. The lower downforce corners means, obviously the slower corners. You've got to create mechanical grip. They just don't quite have the mechanical grip they need to get through there in 3rd gear. You could run through there in 3rd gear if you're trying to fuel save. You'd save yourself a little bit of torque on the exit as well, put less load through the rear tires. Get to the 1 board here and then jump on the brakes. That's so tricky. Just to be able to transition the weight to the front of the car, then try and pull the car up. Actually, just keep an eye on Polo Hernandez. Is really closing in here quite aggressively on Henry Bennett. So he's had a couple mistakes here. Holds it just... One of the biggest benefits of a high downforce car is that you can carry a lot more speed through the faster corners. Back to 2nd gear, back to 1st gear. You've got to be careful getting on the power here. Bank it in, and you're just on and off, on and off, on and off, balancing it on the throttle. Leave it in 3rd gear. The engine braking helps to turn the car around the corner through the carousel there. Up to 5th gear, you get to 6th gear just before you get to the kink. You can back it off, leave it in 5th gear if you want. It'll help you turn, a little bit extra torque on the corner exit, but 6th gear is ultimately going to be faster. All the way down to Canada corner, another big braking zone. Jump on the anchors late, all the way back to 2nd gear from 6th in such a short distance. He actually goes back to 1st gear there. I thought he'd stay in 2nd. Anyway, here we go through hurry down. See the bumps there. The car just wants to kick to the right. Not enough grip on the front. You can't keep the cars in contact with the road. Such a tricky corner, this one. Late apex. And then you're going to try and get back to the power. You're trying to brake really late, brake as much as possible in a straight line with these cars, so that you're not losing grip. The way that the tires work in these machines, and in fact in any car, is that they have a certain amount of friction with the road. That friction can only be applied to do one of 3 things: turn the car, stop the car, accelerate the car. That is the only 3 things it can do. When it breaks the limits, you can turn the car and brake at the same time. The grip level's the same. The amount of steering input that you can put in gets reduced by the amount of braking that you're doing, by the amount of acceleration that you're doing. These sorts of things as well. So whilst ever you're turning the steering wheel, you can't put the brake on anywhere near as hard, because otherwise the tires just lock and you go straight on. It's the same thing with accelerating. Whilst you've still got steering lock in, the car hasn't got its full grip allocated to going faster. and putting more weight through the rear end of the car. So, you know, you've got to balance where's my grip available, and these guys are doing such a great job at just keeping an eye on them through the carousel. They're staying on the throttle for such an extended period throughout the carousel. GT cars, you have to roll out of the throttle so heavily through there, but these things are so much lighter, just carry so much more speed.
Jim Herrick's actually just now ducked onto pit lane for his second stop of the day, and I don't know, 13 laps to go. He might be one of the only guys that could make it the rest of the way without coming to pit road before the conclusion of this one. You know, two words I've heard you say in several different scenarios here tonight, Scott: risk and reward. When we were on board there with Henry Bennett, we saw in several sections where he went down to first gear. Now, while the reward would be that if the car does bite, it actually gives you a lot more speed coming off of the corner than it would if you stayed in second gear. The risk that you run is the potential for wheel spin, right?
It's the potential to Robert Molesca it and put it in the fence on the inside. You know, it's so easy to do. I mean, these cars, the benefit, very similar to Formula 1. Remember that? A couple of different kinds of engines, you know, different ways that they create the racing, the ways that they do the aero package, but ultimately they are a very similar car. They're a peak level open wheeler. They are at the top of the game in terms of these styles of cars. Now, while they do create an intense amount of aero, an amount of downforce, a Formula 1 car conveniently can fly upside down at 190 kilometers an hour in a tunnel. That's the only amount of speed. That's like 120, 130 mile an hour. They can actually go upside down. They've got that much downforce that it's overriding the weight of the car and gravity at that point. Indy cars would be very, very similar. I'd say they'd probably go a little bit faster to do that just because the slight tweaks to the aero configuration on the cars. What that means is fast corners, a lot of grip. Slow corners, they have to make up for that mechanical grip. They're a lighter car. There's less of the car to force into the road. That means that they have to do it with suspension setting, camber castle, those sorts of things. So whilst they are generally considered faster in the high speed corners, generally GT cars will get off those corners a little bit faster, but then the lighter cars have got the acceleration to get them out of there. And that's what you saw with Robert Molesca's accident, what you saw with Matt Wagner's accident as well. Just that rear torque just coming around.
Wagner, this incident apparently has not affected him in terms of the extent of what happened with Robert Molesca III. He still runs in the 4th position, and even when he came to pit lane 7 laps ago, he did not use his faster pair. So whatever contact he made with what I believe was the right front wing, apparently did not decide to fix that with a faster pair, so might be waiting on this final pit stop to maybe do the faster pair, but it really doesn't have to seem to have affected him in terms of speed, and he's been able to maintain his track position. We jump back there for a brief moment to the 15 of Kobe Moore. He didn't bin it, but he had a moment over in Canada corner, had to gather it back up, and lost the 6th position to Nick DeGroot. So he's still going, he's still in one piece, but a little bit of a scare there for the 15.
Nick DeGroot's only just ahead of him as well, so that battle's still on, and he's still got a race to go and keep your eyes on for. Something I did actually know, whilst we were on board with Henry Bennett, I actually saw the number on the steering wheel tick down from 8 to 7. Why was that? Because Paulo Hernandez was coming. I'm wondering, can you give me a readout on the remaining push to passes of our leaders?
All right, so right now, Henry Bennett sits with 7 push-to-passes remaining, 6 for second place Paulo Hernandez. Rick Ravon, who's kind of been on an island of his own, he's still got 8 to work with in these final 11 laps. Only 3 left for Matt Wagner, and Bronson Stafford, he just used 1, so he's now down to 4 push-to-passes remaining on the 61.
We're into the back half of the race now. There's effectively only 10 laps to go. So that's exactly where I said Bronson Stafford needed to be for the last quarter of the race. That's really well done. Now, the reason that Henry Bennett actually punched that push-to-pass button, you could see that Paulo Hernandez was catching up. He needed to make sure that he maintained that aero bubble behind him, that his rival wasn't getting the benefit of the draft. He wanted to make sure that in a straight line, he wasn't pulling his closest enemy along with him. So that's really smart. He recognized that he needed to use one just to create a little bit of space. Really heads up driving.
So these guys, these race leaders, they all came to pit road anywhere from 15 to 16 laps left in this race. And as we documented, the furthest that we've seen a driver go so far here today is 13 laps. So we're fully expecting these guys are going to be on pit lane at least one more time before the conclusion of this race. Paulo Hernandez was able to close up a little bit of the gap between himself and Henry Bennett with undercutting a lap on that 007. Does he do that again, and when should he do it to make absolutely certain that Bennett's not going to come to pit lane the same lap he does?
He's just got to read. I mean, any time from now, they're clean to come to pit road and get their last of the fuel. Ultimately, I actually think there's maybe a fuel battle. I think these guys have got the potential to run to the end. I think if they back the pace down a little bit. So the reason that you might have seen Paulo Hernandez punch a couple of those push-to-passes was to sneak up onto the back of Henry Bennett and then sit there in his draft, save as much fuel as he possibly can, and make it home from here. Henry Bennett had other ideas. He responded and made sure that he's just generating enough of a lead to keep him out of that draft bubble and keep him from out of threat range as well. So, look, there's potential that they can go home. I think both of them are going to have to pit. Ultimately, Polo's just going to pick a lap. He sees the gap. He sees that his nearest rival is not making that dive to pit road. Ultimately, coming out of this last corner, I want to show the nose toward that pit road from Paulo Hernandez. Just a couple laps in a row. Just see if I can't get Henry Bennett to go down there and then go like absolute gangbusters, get out of there.
Well, we might be setting up for some late race fuel strategy dramatics for the second week in a row. We had it last week at Michigan. Now, one driver that does not feel that anybody can make it on fuel is Bronson Stafford. We saw he just came to pit lane for potentially his final pit stop of the day, and that was with 10 laps remaining. So, unless Bennett and Hernandez know something the rest of the field don't know, I think that these guys also will probably be having to come to pit road. The one guy that I think will probably be seen on pit lane not too long from now is Rick Ravon, just based on the fact that, as I mentioned, he's on an island by his own. Nobody else is around him, so he's not being able to get the benefit of anyone's draft. He's using up just about as much fuel as a driver out there in clean air can.
Yeah, and something else to note is when these drivers come to pit road, they don't want other lap traffic around them. They want to be very aware that they're going to be out, they're going to be on their own, and they can turn their own laps so they don't have to worry anybody. Conveniently, for both Henry Bennett and Paulo Hernandez, there's one car in their pit window at all. You know, and I have a feeling that the number 18 machine of Jeff Hysong isn't actually in their pit window. They're going to come out, I would say, a good 5 to 7 seconds behind him. So they're in a really, really good space. They can make this pit stop. They come out in the clear air out on the track, and then they can just go for it. So that takes that question mark out of the equation. You're looking for a window on the track that's clear, you can get out and you're nice and safe. For everyone else, Rick Ravon excluded, because Rick Ravon right now has got that third position nice and locked up, they're going to come out, they're going to pit, and they're going to come out in traffic. There's nothing that they can do about that. Ultimately, they're probably just going to either wait a few laps, be the first one to blink. I think they need to be the last one to blink if they want to get out and get into that free bit of clear air at the back of the track and see what happens.
Eric Peterson, you saw making his final pit stop as we watched the battle for fourth. Kobe Moore got back around Nick DeGroot, but DeGroot not going away quietly as he remains latched to the back of that 50 machine. Both these drivers still going to have to come to pit road before the conclusion. I believe that we also have the 33 of Nicholas Winook. He had to come down pit lane for an extensive repair on his 33. He's been there for almost 4 minutes now, 4 laps down. So another driver has had some issues here today at Road America. I mean, if these guys were going to split the final run since their last pit stop, now would be the lap. They're about to complete the 8th lap of what would have been 15 to go when they last were on pit road. So we'll see if they split it in half, or if maybe one or two or both of these guys will go to the furthest they can go, which would be just around 3 laps to go or so.
I mean, different options, you know, who really knows? Tires could be a factor. I don't think so. IndyCars don't tend to wear their tires anywhere near enough, but it could necessarily be a factor. Do you take tires? Do you not take tires? If you don't take tires, there is a risk that at the end of the fuel stint, you will be wearing a little bit, you won't have the pace. However, when you come out, you will have warm tires straight away. You will be able to push cold tires. So let's talk about how tires generate their grip. They do it by making contact with the road surface. The more contact, the more grip there is. The softer a tire, the more it flexes into the road surface, the more grip it'll generate by pushing into the road surface more, because it can mold itself around all the stones, all the rocks and things that are actually on that road surface. Cold tires, well, when's the last time that you heated up a little bit of rubber ball or plastic or something? One of those bouncy balls, anything like that. When they're cold, squash ball, very good example, squash ball. When they're cold, they don't flex, they don't bounce as well. They're very stiff, they don't want to move. Tires, same deal. Rubber, you heat it up to about 90 degrees Celsius. I have no idea what that is in Fahrenheit, don't even ask me. The wall of the tire starts to mold itself to the road a little bit more. The tire moves around a lot more. That generates a lot more grip. It's pressing itself into the road better, and it just creates a larger contact patch that, whenever you're racing, it's all about contact patch and how that contact patch is helping you. More contact patch, more grip, more faster.
That's Jim Herrick in the 57, just up ahead of the race leader, Henry Bennett. Right now, Herrick is the last car on the lead lap in the 9th position. Now, granted, whoa, Herrick actually going to go off into the sand trap there, trying to get out of the race leader's way. That's going to cost him a little bit of time. Back to Jeff Heisong in the 18 in that battle for 9th position. But right now, with him a lap down, now 8 drivers on the lead lap. And obviously, that number will get smaller when we end up having these race leaders come to pit road. Other drivers will be able to get the laps back that they lost since they had already been on pit road so far here for their final stop of the day. One thing that I'm also noticing here as well with our 2 race leaders is the push to passes. They've kind of mirrored each other. They've actually both used another push to pass since we last checked in. Bennett with 6 and Hernandez with 5. Hernandez, however, is slowly closing up the gap. It opened up to about 9/10. It's now been cut down to about 7.5/10, so he's still keeping Henry Bennett honest. I've got a feeling Pit Road is going to be the deciding factor in this race here today, because both these drivers have seemed to have the same pace with each other. There's not really been a gain or a loss, a huge fluctuation in the interval between these two. I think it's going to come down about execution, and yes, you're right, that is, I believe, Gary Corley and the 7.
Yeah, I agree. Pit stop, execution. Have a look at Paulo Hernandez right now. He's within that second marker. Ultimately, 5 push to passes to go, 6 push to passes to go. They've got a lot of wiggle room here in terms of those push to passes. Do they come down and do they start burning them? Or do they just fake? They come down pit road and they expect the other driver just to burn all their push to passes up. What that means is then, if you're on Paulo Hernandez's seat, you don't know that you're 1 less than the race leader in Henry Bennett, but you have a fair idea that he would have a lot of them left over. So, from his point of view, he's going to start burning them up. Henry Bennett, I feel, is just going to sit here and he's going to sit on them. I don't think he uses them until Paulo Hernandez goes past him, and then he uses them so that he can't respond.
Here's the battle for the 7th position. These are the 2 highest drivers that have already been to pit lane. Should be good to make the rest of the way on fuel. Bronson Stafford looking ahead to 7th place Matt Wagner. We've just had 6th place Kobe Moore dive onto pit lane, so he'll be making his final stop of the day. And in terms of Henry Bennett here today, I mean, we talked about last year, the dominating performance out of Robert Maleska III. Well, it's been a dominating performance here for Henry Bennett as well. Not only has he led the most laps... And so there you go.
Yep.
Gonna undercut the 007. We'll see if this is going to pan out for him with 5 laps to go. But going back to Henry Bennett.
Yeah, on Henry Bennett's push to pass counter. I'm curious. Does he burn it coming out here and running down to turn 5?
Keep a look on it here. But in the case of Henry Bennett, back in practice, he laid down a 1:43.6.
This is actually a really smart call here. So, sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off here. The reason I'm cutting you off, he's just encountered traffic on a straight. It's Bronson Stafford who's just made his final stop. This is actually really bad for Bronson Stafford as well, because this means that Bronson Stafford has had to roll out of the throttle and let Henry Bennett come on through. Henry Bennett, however, has had to deal with the traffic. That may not have cost him time, but 0.1, 0.2 of a second, when the gap was only a second, is a heap of time.
That's actually the 51 of Jim Herrick. Jim Brooks, that he just put a second lap down. That was that car in his way there through 5 and 6. And looking in terms of the lap times of Henry Bennett, as I said, he had a 1:43.6 back in practice. Here in race, 1:43.8. The fastest lap that has been laid down here at Road America in a Dark Horse Racing Series. Blows the 141.122 or 144.122 that Maleska III had here 1 year ago.
Yeah, so maybe Maleska III just didn't have the pace. So there you go. Maybe it was an outright pace thing. He was pushing well and above and beyond his limitations. Interesting to note, Bennett, straight in. Needs to cover Paulo Hernandez off. He doesn't want to let him free. Give me that push to pass count again, please, Seth.
5-5 now. Bennett used one at some point on that last lap. Polo Hernandez still sitting with the 5 he had prior to his pit stop.
Yeah, he used it. He used it to get around the lap car. He was 0.4 of a second faster in that second sector, which is the run down to turn 5. So that's where he burned it.
Polo Hernandez is going to try and see if he can close up the gap between himself and Henry Bennett. He's just now heading through the final corner to the uphill front straightaway. Bennett about halfway through his pit stop. Now he's down and away. Wow, that was a lightning fast stop. I don't think Bennett took tires. Most everybody else has been hitting between 7.5 to 9 second pit stops. He was under 5 seconds on pit lane.
I think that's a mistake from Polo Hernandez. With only such a short distance to go to the end of the race, he had to do something different. I don't think taking tires was the smart call. I think he needed to just come in, pit, and go. Because look at the margin now. It was a second. It's 3 seconds the difference. These guys needed a splash of fuel. Tires are longer than a splash of fuel. Full tank? Yeah, you'll get that in. You'll get tires done. No problem. It's a no-brainer to grab tires when you're grabbing a full tank. In this situation, big mistake.
Talked about the fact that the time spent on pit road, it exemplifies the time gained or lost on the racetrack. You talked about it, about a second difference between the two when they made their pit stops. A 4.7 pit stop for Bennett and a 7.7 pit stop for Polo Hernandez now has the gap opened up to 4 seconds between the top two.
Yeah, and this means that Bennett can just sit here. He doesn't have to push. He doesn't have to do anything. His tires may lag a little bit. He may be a little bit underpowered. But when you got a gap of 4 seconds and you've got, 3 and a bit laps to go, that is a second a lap that Polo Hernandez is going to take out of him. There's push-to-passes there available, but both of these drivers have got the exact same number. I can guarantee you that it is a spam fest on that push-to-pass button now.
Right now, Polo Hernandez has used 2 of his push-to-passes in the last lap and a half. Henry Bennett just used one right there on the uphill section of the front straightaway. Polo Hernandez just used another one, so Hernandez is down to 2 push-to-passes. Henry Bennett still has 4 in the bank with less than 3 to go.
Yeah, but Polo Hernandez has to. He has to at least try and close this margin. If he can get into the draft range, and then Henry Bennett pushes the push-to-pass, it's so much less effective. I wonder if Bennett's not punched another one right there.
This is interesting, too. I don't know if this is just in the fact that they didn't feel that they needed them, or in the fact that they really weren't running around a lot of traffic, but there are 3 drivers in the field that have still not even used a push-to-pass here tonight. Jim Herrick's the highest of them, holding down the 6th position. Also, Jeff Heisong back in 11th and Jim Brooks back in 13th. They have not used any of the 10 allotted push-to-passes here tonight.
Look, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to remember to bind a button. This isn't IndyCar where they just hand you a wheel. They go, yeah, the push-to-pass button is this big red one that says go faster. You have to have a good spot on your wheel, on your controls, to actually have that push-to-pass available. And then, as a driver, how often do you actually use this push-to-pass system? It's only when IndyCars go to road. It's only when the Formula Renault 3.5s are used as well. They have a DRS system, which is very, very similar. Just opens a flap in the rear wing. Effectively does the same job. So it's memory, it's practice using them, because it's a lot more horsepower, there's a lot more potential for wheel spin, but it is such a major advantage that you want to have access to them, but, still, clearly they're having a great night without running with them.
We're looking back there at Bronson Stafford, right now in the 4th position. Henry Bennett leading this race. According to the calculations that I'm really trying to do in my head here, which are not always accurate, as my track record has shown, but I'm projecting right here, Henry Bennett about 3 or 4 points.
43.6 from Henry Bennett too. Yeah, keep going, sorry.
Oh, wow, yeah. 6:08. That's his fastest lap of the day. That even beats his practice lap earlier on tonight. But it's looking like Bennett by 3 or 4 points over Bronson Stafford heading into next weekend. There's even guys that had good runs last week at Michigan that are having solid outings here tonight as well that could keep the points gap amongst the top 5 or 6 even close. Rick Ravon, who finished 6th last week, he's up there in the 3rd position. Matt Wagner, who was 9th last week, he's up there in 5th. And I know Gale Brooks has now moved up into the top top 10 as well, in that 9th position after he had a 4th place run last week at Michigan. So the point stands after 2 races, they're still going to be awfully close. And as I mentioned, next week, for the first time on the Dark Horse Racing schedule, New Hampshire has been added. It'll be the first time these drivers take to that racetrack, so everybody's going to be having a clean drawing board at that point in time.
Yeah, that's a really good opportunity just to reset everything and say, hey, you guys are going to get out there. You guys are going to do practice. You guys are going to set this thing up correctly. Just having a quick look, Matt Wagner and Bronson Stafford. This is a battle that's been raging on for most of the evening as well. Matt Wagner had that spin, has had to find his way back past Bronson Stafford. Bronson Stafford has once again clipped him in terms of the pit stop strategy. Where are these guys at on the push to passes as well?
Both of them sit with 1 push to pass left. As a matter of fact, just moments ago, Polar Hernandez used his last push to pass. Henry Bennett just used 1. He is now down to 1. So that battle for the 4th position may be the best one here on this final lap coming to the checkers as Bennett took the white flag.
Yeah, so Bennett's clearly got it. That guy is just completely and utterly in control. He's using those push to passes liberally, but he's also using them within control. He is the 143.3, 399, so it's a 143.4. That guy is flying. No fuel in that car. The thing is flying. So expect that last lap to be quick. Keep your eyes, though, on Matt Wagner and Bronson Stafford. Matt Wagner just coming up and out of turn 5, the next left-hander, the Corvette curve, I think it is, the next left-hander, underneath the bridge, just drifted off the circuit. For me, he's been faster than Bronson Stafford all night long. It's just that Bronson Stafford hasn't put a foot wrong. Matt Wagner has made multiple mistakes, and now he's got a lap to go to try and get back past him.
Yeah, I'm not certain if he's going to be able to because he lost a little bit of ground in the first couple corners that last time by. Fell to a 2.5 seconds behind the 61. He's now closed it back up a little bit, 1.2 seconds between those two as they are just now taking the white flag. Bennett's around about midway through this lap, about to take the checkered.
Yeah, Bennett's at Canada corner, so he's pretty much on the run of the flag. He's got it all locked up. There's nothing that Pauline Hernandez can do. He's done the best possible things that he can do. Rick Ravon has got it all locked up, barring a catastrophe. This is the battle that I want to keep my eyes on.
Spinner! That was Jim Brooks, I believe, just in front of the race leader. Bennett got through it. Jim Herrick has had a problem. He's actually on pit lane, couldn't make it on fuel. Bennett's going to cross the line and win this race. Let's drop back to that battle for 4th.
Yeah, keep your eyes here. Bronson Stafford still, now it's down to 0.8, now it's down to 0.7. This is where Wagner was off the road last time by. They'll flick it to the right here. They'll head down to another slow corner. Stafford is weak in the braking zones. In fact, he's weak everywhere. This is Wagner just coming at him, hammer and tong. This is going to be decided, I think, out on track. Don't expect this to go to the line slaying down.
And now it's car versus car because neither driver has a push to pass left to work with. So it's basically just going to come down to who has the fastest car, who's able to attack the corners and carry the most speed here in these final couple of turns.
I mean, look at that. Wagner is in the draft. He's there. He's doing everything he possibly can. But that mistake on that penultimate lap has brought it all undone for Matt Wagner. Bronson Stafford is going to grab 4th place here, barring a disaster.
Through the final turn here, Wagner tries to drive it deep, couldn't quite get there. It's going to be Bronson Stafford who will hold on to 4th. Wagner will complete the top 5 and 5th behind Rick Ravon, Polar Hernandez, and tonight's race winner, Henry Bennett.
Wow, what a race from both of those guys. They were just saying to each other on the radio how much they appreciate it. Matt Wagner just said to him as well, too many mistakes. Is this championship going to be decided by too many mistakes? Because Wagner put himself in the window, remember, as well, to lead the championship. He's going to be right there. He got a better outing than Henry Bennett last week, but Bennett comes home the victor. The point scenario, after 2 races, we weren't expecting it to be this close, but it really, really is.
Definitely is, and again, heading into a bit of a wild card race for all since it's its first time in the schedule in New Hampshire. We're still waiting for some drivers to cross the start-finish line to complete their lap. Most of the drivers that already completed were drivers up inside of the top 5, 6, as well as drivers that were off the lead lap, but the rest of the top 10 going to be completed by Covey Moore in 6th, Nick DeGroot in 7th, Gale Brooks in 8th. Despite him running out of fuel, having to come to pit lane the closing stages, Jim Herrick's going to get credit for 9th, and Eric Peterson is going to complete the top 10. But Henry Bennett, what a dominating performance here tonight. And that's just the most interesting thing about the IndyCar points as well, is the fact that a driver that last week finished 10th at Michigan with a win here tonight, he's now up at the top of the leaderboard as far as the point standings.
Yeah, but you've got to look at a lot of the drivers that are around him in terms of the point standings as well. It's Robert Maleska doesn't have to do very much here at this race to walk away from the round, still hanging on to that championship lead. Third was more than enough. That's all he needed to do. He just needed to keep an eye on Paulo Hernandez, keep an eye on Henry Bennett. I can guarantee you, if Robert Maleska's there in that last stage of the race, he doesn't take tyres that pit stop, all of a sudden he grabs himself a second place finish. He just needed to be consistent. He didn't need to be quick. He just needed to be consistent. He couldn't pull it off. That says exactly how difficult it is to drive these cars at this pace for this long of a time. Didn't grab points. Matt Wagner made too many mistakes. Ultimately, had the pace to finish P3 tonight. Finishes P5 because of the amount of times he was off the road or facing in the wrong direction. That is what can decide championships, ladies and gents.
Yeah, it's interesting because I kind of come from an offline racing background, and so many times I've seen, and obviously it's all in, the AI's hands, but I've seen where a champion of a previous season, all of a sudden they don't do well in the upcoming season. If we go back to season 2, Nick DeGroot dominated that season. He had 5 wins in the last 8 races of that season. This past season, season 3, he wasn't able to get up there with Robert Maleska III. He had a strong showing the entirety of the schedule, but he was only able to make his way up to 3rd in the overall standings. This season, Robert Maleska III comes in after 10 wins last season. He comes in here tonight, as we said, kind of the first chink in the armor we've seen out of that 91. Has he hit the championship slump? Is he feeling the pressure here of trying to go back-to-back championships, and that's what's making these mistakes?
I mean, there's a lot. Right now, I think it's just a mistake. If this continues, well, then I start to go, maybe. But we've got to remember, this is just one race. This is a difficult race. It's a tricky race. The cars love it around here. This is a really good circuit for the Indy cars. It's phenomenal. Ask a lot of questions of the drivers. Ask too many questions of a couple of drivers tonight. They fall down the standings. So, look, if they show up again next week, if they show up again at New Hampshire, and all of a sudden it's another uncharacteristic night for Maleska, then the question starts to arise for me. If he does it again the following week, then I'm like, okay, all right, there is definitely something going on here. He is not happy. And I've seen drivers do it before. It happens all the time. They settle in, they get comfortable, they know that they're good, and then all of a sudden somebody else just rises up, starts to push them, and they push themselves too far. That's what the key factor is. They're going too hard for what their own abilities can really sustain, and they drive it too deep, too hard, too many times, and the car ends up in the fence.
We gotta bring this up too. Obviously, we'll be touching on this a lot when we get to New Hampshire next week about what the point standings look like, but we have to bear this in mind too, because you touched on it. They do have drop weeks in this series, so Robert Maleska III could take the points that he lost here tonight. He could gain them back depending on how he finishes out the rest of the season, maybe utilizing tonight here at Road America as his drop week choice.
You don't want to burn, early on in the season, you just want to be consistent. And the reason for that is, give yourself that flexibility at the back end of the season to go a lot harder. Now that he's burned off a drop week, a lot of his competition does still have that available to them. Look at Henry Bennett, who finished, I think, just outside the top 10 last week. Look at Matt Wagner, who finished just inside the top 10 last week. Yeah, it wasn't a great points night for them, but it was still a points night. It was still enough points to keep them relevant in terms of championship standings. They come here tonight, they have a little bit of a better of a points night. Robert Maleska has a dud, and they're still right up there, and indeed, some of those guys are going to overtake him in terms of the point standings. That's what it's about. Save your drop rounds up. Use them at the back end of the season, because if you're fighting somebody very, very hard, very, very close, you're going to have that ability to just go that little bit harder that you might necessarily go if you don't have that drop week to contend with. As soon as you burn that drop week up, it's in the trash. There's nothing you can do about that. You cannot get that back.
It's going to be very interesting to see how drivers strategically choose their drop weeks here during the course of this season. Let's see if we can go down trackside and talk to some of our podium finishers here tonight. And let's kick things off with our 3rd place finisher, Rick Ravon. Hey, Rick, Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Hey, I got you. What's going on, guys?
Well, man, I don't want to say that the second half of this race that you may have had the most boring spot on the racetrack, but there was nobody ahead of you, nobody behind you. Gave you the opportunity to just kind of just go out there, hit your marks. But what were some of the struggles that you were having to deal with here today at Road America?
Well, I mean, it's this is a fun racetrack, and I don't know. I mean, Henry Bennett and Polo Hernandez, they were just gone. I don't know where they found that kind of speed, but holy cow, they had this place wired today. I guess I forget his name, the points leader. He made a mistake. He ended up off the track, and I picked up third. I was like, oh, okay, podium if I could just hang on. But Matt Wagner was putting me under a whole ton of pressure, and it's funny. And I my hand up to God, I just said, why don't you make a mistake already, Wagner? And it was like 2 seconds later, and he spun behind me, and I went, oh, are you kidding me? I was like, I jinxed him or something. Kind of felt bad for the guy. He's a good guy, but that's really what I needed because I don't think I was going to be able to hold Wagner back. He just had the race pace on me. But then again, I was saving all my push to passes for the end if I should need it. So who knows what would have happened? But fantastic race. What a great series. I love this, man. I'm just in heaven here. Dark Horse is just fantastic.
On that note, Rick, I mean, you said that you didn't have the pace to cover Matt Wagner off, but Matt Wagner's only behind you because he's made mistakes. How important is it to you as a driver to go out there to turn those consistent laps? Because pace is fantastic, but if you're spinning every second lap, pace means absolutely nothing.
Well, that's quite true. I mean, I knew I didn't have the pace of Bennett and Hernandez up there, so I was just going to settle in for fourth and battle with Wagner for it. But then when third place went off and I picked up third, I knew that it was important to not make mistakes. That's probably why my pace wasn't as quick as it was in practice because, you put a wheel off. These cars, they kind of jump around a little bit. I think the suspensions are just kind of stiff the way iRacing has them. And maybe that's the way they are in real life. I don't know. I've never driven them. But you got to be consistent. You make a mistake and you're going to lose, 6, 7, 8 seconds, depending on where on the racetrack you made that mistake and spun off. So it's extremely important to stay consistent.
Rick, coming off that good performance you had, that top 5 run last week at Michigan, following it up with a third place run here at Road America. I mean, obviously, this is going to keep you up there in the battle for the point stands. We were kind of watching the drivers out there based off how they finished last week to this week, and there's about 4 or 5 drivers you could probably throw under a blanket heading to next week. Now, next week we go to New Hampshire, which is a track that is making its debut on the schedule. So what's the confidence level going into that? How much testing have you done in an Indy car at that mile racetrack?
Well, I got a lot of miles under my belt, pretty much every American racetrack in an Indy car. I guess Robert Maleska, I think that's his name. I think that's how you pronounce it. He kind of snook everybody in Michigan, and he conserve, and got to the end and just blew everybody's doors off there. He had plenty of fuel to make it, but hey, as far as I'm concerned, he's the guy to beat. Bennett's the guy to beat. Hernandez. But you know what? You got so many guys here. I mean, Wagner and DeGroot. I've raced with DeGroot in the iRacing official races. He is just so good. Peterson. I know Jim Brooks and Corley. These are all really, really good racers, and it's going to take a lot of dedication. And as far as the races coming up, it's just a matter of getting finding a fast way around and just doing the best you can to stay out of trouble and get to the end of the race. I think that's going to be a tight race. Now these cars aren't like the IR18, so we don't have the roll bar adjustments and the weight jackers, so we can compensate for a push. But I have a feeling that after the tires start to wear, I don't know how many laps, 4, 5, 6 laps, it's going to be very difficult to run up on somebody because you're just going to lose so much in the corners. So it's going to be an interesting race next week. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, we definitely are too. Well, Rick, congratulations on back-to-back top 5s to start out the season. Third place here tonight at Road America. And now we're going to give the opportunity to thank some sponsors and do some shout-outs.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Seth. I want to thank you guys for putting on a great show. I'm sure you did. I mean, I'll listen to it later. I just want to thank the guys at Dark Horse who make this possible. And I want to thank all the drivers for they're just such class acts. I have 2 races down with these guys, and I haven't had any problems whatsoever. They all race you hard, and they race you clean, and that's what makes this series so great. It's run by good guys, and you've got a bunch of good guys running it, and they race like gentlemen. They race you hard and clean.
Well, that's Rick Ravon, third place here tonight at the Twisty Road America. Congratulations, Rick. Best of luck to you next week in New Hampshire.
Thanks so much, Seth. I'm really looking forward to it. Can't wait. Thank you.
Let's now see if we can get our second place finisher here tonight, Polo Hernandez. Hey, Polo, it's Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yeah.
All right, well, we saw you had a strong car last week at Michigan up at the front, but had a little bit of an issue there in the closing stages of that one. Here tonight, though, strong performance, stayed up in the podium all night long, second place, but what little more did you need to get to that 007? Because it looked like the two of you had just about the same amount of pace the entirety of this race.
Well, he's just really, really fast. I mean, I couldn't done too much. I mean, just try to do, something like a strategy thing, undercut. I tried when my second pit stop, but it didn't work, kind of. I just approached him a little bit, but he's just really fast. No wonder why he has 6 KI. Yeah, he's just really fast. I can't say anything more.
Well, look, I mean, Polo, it's a rough night of racing. You were trying to track down Henry Bennett all night long. You took tyres that final stop. Do you think that was a mistake?
Yeah, I think it was a mistake. Well, not really. I just wanted the last stint to do the fastest lap at the end. He just stole it from me. I did like a 43.4. Yeah, he did a 43.3. But that was my plan. Take tires, use all the push to pass. I didn't use it that much in the middle of the race. I just saved it for last and tried to do the fastest lap at the end.
Still a strong performance out of you here tonight, Polo. Congratulations. We're now going to give you the opportunity to thank those sponsors and do some shout-outs.
Thank you so much.
And looks like we are now going to go down to Victory Lane and talk with our race winner here, Henry Bennett. A little bit of difficulty here. Hang on. We can see if we can get Henry in here. For some reason I'm having some difficulty here with Discord. I don't know if you can move him down, Scott, or not.
Let's have a look. Yeah, I'm having difficulties as well. Give me a sec.
We got some problems going on here where we're unable to move people in and out, folks. So just bear with us here. We're going to get Henry Bennett in just a moment.
Got him.
There we go.
There you go.
Henry, Scott, and Seth up here in the FRM booth. Got us?
I got you.
All right. Well, man, obviously, congratulations on a dominating performance here tonight at Road America. But I got to ask, I mean, was there anything you struggled with here tonight? Because you led the most laps. You spent this entire race out in front. You put down the fastest lap of the race, which completely blew out the fastest lap that you had in practice by 0.3. Was there anything you struggled with here tonight? Was there any wheel that was put wrong that we might not have captured on the broadcast tonight?
I mean, the biggest struggle was trying to keep ahead of Polo. I mean, every time I pulled a gap, he'd come back, and every time we pitted, he'd be there in my mirrors. I couldn't relax while he was still there. He was so fast. He really kept me honest. I think I only won it comfortably because I did the little bit of strategy at the end without changing tyres on the last stop, and he changed tyres. So that saved me 4 seconds.
We have a look at what could have been for Robert Maleska here tonight. I mean, we've talked about that to death. These things, it's risk versus reward. We went on board with you for a lap, and you're shifting down into first in a lot of places. How difficult is it to get the rear end of this Indy car, and indeed most open wheel cars, to settle down with an iRacing? It's not easy.
No, I think the track and package does have a few quirks, but once you learn what inputs to do to drive around those quirks, you can really avoid having the rear end step out on you. I mean, I know exactly what he did, and I was doing it in practice as well. And it could have easily happened to me as well. If you just got to be ready for when the those quirks happen in the car handling, and just be ready to release the throttle, or just be slightly more gradual on throttle, and the car will do what you want, really.
Henry, we talked about, based on the fact this is the first road course stop of the season, you guys, for the first time this season, had those 10 push-to-passes, and I had to chuckle because no sooner did the green flag drop, and you used one of them there on the uphill headed for that start-finish line. But being the race leader, how difficult is it to be able to know when to use that push-to-pass and when not to? Because it really seemed like the only times we saw you use a number of those push-to-passes is when the 0-1 was closing up to you.
Yeah, I mean, you always really want to save most of them till the end of the race because you never know what situation you'll be in. And if you're fighting a guy that's saved more than you, then in all likelihood, at a track like this with the long straights, they're going to beat you on a run to the line or over the last lap. So yeah, it's always, and starting a race here is such a long straight. You really kind of want to get a nice little gap before turn 1, so that you're not really in danger of any dive bombs or any incidents on the first lap. So that's just a safety thing to use the push to pass on the first lap. But yeah, after that, just really using it to kind of maintain a gap to anyone behind. Yeah, really have to use them sparingly, especially in a race as long as this, and save them till the end when it really counts.
Well, Henry, you had that 10th place run last week at Michigan. You dominated here tonight. I was trying to do all the calculations in my head. Normally, I don't have that good of a track record of being able to do the mathematics in my brain, but got it right here tonight. You are going to be the points leader going into New Hampshire, 4 points over Bronson Stafford. So what's the thought process going into that? Because it's the first time New Hampshire appears on the Dark Horse schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I like the track. I don't have a great record there. The short ovals probably, I'd say, my weakness out of all the kind of tracks. But probably shouldn't have revealed that, but now everyone knows. But yeah, looking forward to it. But yeah, see how it turns out.
Well, Henry, congratulations on a solid outing here tonight at Road America. You pick up the victory, you pick up the points lead all in one nice little package, and now we're going to give you the opportunity for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
A massive thank you to Factory Backed Motorsports. Yeah, it took me in for the season at running for the Dark Horse League, and yeah, a great bunch of guys, and enjoy running with them. And yeah, big thanks to the league, Jim, who couldn't be here, Eric, everyone who organises it does a great job, and yeah, happy to be part of the league. Yeah, enjoying it so far, and yeah, looking forward to the rest of the season.
Well, that's Henry Bennett. He's your winner here tonight at Road America, the second race of the season for the Dark Horse Racing Series, and your points leader heading to New Hampshire. Congratulations, Henry, and best of luck next week.
Thanks.
Well, Scott, 2 seasons separated and almost the same song, but different chorus. A car goes out there, a car dominates. This season, however, it wasn't exactly a runaway. Polo Hernandez kept Henry Bennett pretty honest for a majority of this one.
It was a good race, and I mean, even whilst Robert Molesca was there, we had a 3-car fight, and I was just sitting there watching the laps tick by and going, okay, we've just got to be patient. This is going to evolve into a battle. You've just got to sit here and watch. And it's something that's different, and it doesn't really present itself to a lot of our normal viewers. Road course, it's all about fuel numbers. It's all about getting yourself into that final stop. Normally, the race does not matter until that point, and afterwards, all of a sudden, the race just explodes. It seems so weird, You're just out there, you're just turning laps. What's the point in that? The point is, you need to make sure that you are positioned best at that last stop. You have the machinery underneath you. You have the car quirks under control, and number 4, you have the car's power to be really able to assist you in that. In the IndyCar, we got push-to-pass system. That's another sort of thing that you can play around with, another way to manipulate your race and create some space. Rick Ravon, I think he managed his race absolutely to perfection tonight. You heard him talk about it in his interview. He had the opportunity to push. Was there a reason to push? It really wasn't. What was his goal for tonight? It was just to run there, just to make sure that he grabbed a bag full of points. Why did he need to push? He didn't. Did he push? No. He just made sure that he'd come home in that third position, and what a great result for him.
You know, I find it interesting too because usually in the IndyCar series we end up having the first race of the season be the closest that drivers are points-wise for the entirety of the season, but not so here. If we take a look at last week, the top 5, they were separated by 24 points. 1 week later, the top 5 are only separated by 22 points. Bennett, 4 points over Stafford. Maleska drops 2 spots, 11 points back in third position. 14 points back is Rick Ravon, as you mentioned, consistent run today. And Polo Hernandez, runner-up finish, moves him up 8 spots in the standings, 22 points back in the 5th position. So the points have actually closed up here after the first road course race of the season.
Yeah, and it's ultimately something to consider as well. You know, it's so different. For the first time in history, we're heading to a bunch of courses in a stock car capacity. Look at all the courses that NASCAR is going to. They haven't really been to. They've been to COTA, you know, they've been to this, they've been to that, but it's been such a long time that they've been to this course that we saw out there tonight. Will that mean that we see something like what we've seen here tonight in terms of IndyCar? We see mistakes. We see cars around in spots that they necessarily won't normally be. The drivers got tested here tonight. There's gonna be a couple more road courses throughout the schedule. These drivers are gonna have to go away. They're gonna have to do some more homework. They're gonna have to look at tonight's results and say, hey, there's points on offer here. If I don't take these points, I am throwing away valuable points that my drop rounds are just not going to cover. Robert Maleska is capable of taking those points, and tonight he walks home with a big fat 0 in the points column. That's not good enough for a champion. That is not good enough if he wants to remain champion.
Well, so far this season, we're 2 for 2 and a driver going coast-to-coast pole to win. Maleska did it at Michigan, and Henry Bennett does it here tonight at Road America. We've got a slew of mile-and-a-halfs coming up in the next few weeks, but not before we take to the Magic Mile, New Hampshire next week. And as mentioned, it's the first time that it appears on the Dark Horse Racing Series schedule, so that's going to be a lot of fun to see how these drivers are able to adapt the IndyCars racing at that short mile track. But that's going to be taking place next week. We're going to be bringing you coverage of that next Wednesday night. The green flag will be scheduled to fly at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But a good one here today at the winding road course of Road America. Scott, appreciate you joining me in the booth.
Oh man, it was a fantastic opportunity to bring everyone into what makes up the bulk of my my racing career as these circuit races. I hope that you all learned a lot here tonight, because I certainly did.
Thanks to everyone that tuned in this evening. Hope you guys enjoyed our coverage of the Dark Horse Racing Series presented by Troy Leeds Designs. We'll see you guys at New Hampshire next week on Wednesday night. For Scott Rankin, I'm Seth Cole. You've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flat Out Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flat Out Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flat Out Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flat Out Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.